Martha Green had lived in her old house for nearly half a century. This house wasn't just a home, it was a treasure trove of memories. The laughter of her children, family dinners, and the long days she'd spent caring for every small detail within it. The house had aged, just like Martha, but every crack, every stain on the walls, every fingerprint left on the windows was a testament to a life well lived in it. This house had seen Martha as a resilient mother, one who sacrificed everything for her family. She had cared for Emily, her only daughter, with all the love a mother could give. And when Brian, her husband, passed away, he left a void that nothing could fill. Emily, her daughter, had left home years ago to build her own life. It was something Martha had always hoped for. She wanted Emily to be independent. But she never expected that one day, that independence would lead to an emotional distance between them. A distance that would leave Martha feeling as though she had no one to rely on. Martha didn't complain, at least not to anyone else. Emily, her light, her only child, was supposed to be the joy of her life. The one she had sacrificed so much for. But as the years passed, Emily became more distant, more absorbed in her work and life. Every time they did meet, it felt more like an exchange of pleasantries than a meaningful connection. Martha lay on her hospital bed at San Francisco General, her body sore from a minor surgery. For the past 2 weeks, the sterile white walls of the hospital room had been her world. She had been here, alone, while her daughter Emily hadn't made a single phone call. Martha wasn't surprised, but the silence hung in the air like a thick fog. She knew Emily was busy, but the prolonged silence made her feel as though she was no longer important to her own child. Martha closed her eyes, listening to the faint beat of her heart. A part of her wanted to call Emily again, to hear her voice, but then she remembered the last few calls, how they were often ignored or answered quickly with barely any care. The calls had become routine, a quiet reminder that her daughter no longer cared for her the way she once had. One evening, as the night sky darkened over the Bay Area, Martha tried dialing Emily's number again. But, as always, the phone remained silent. She wasn't surprised. In fact, the coldness that spread over her heart was not the result of physical pain, but of the emotional void that grew larger with each passing day. But through all of this, there was one person who was always there for Martha. Claire, her daughter-in-law, was a woman who, despite not being related by blood, showed Martha more love and care than anyone else. Claire came to visit every day. She changed Martha's bandages, brought her meals, and made sure the doctor's orders were followed. Claire never complained. She was gentle, patient, and always took care of Martha with the utmost tenderness. One afternoon, as Martha lay in bed in agony, Claire entered, sat by her side, and placed a warm cup of water in Martha's hand. "Martha, how are you feeling?" Claire asked, her voice full of concern. Martha didn't answer right away. She simply felt the warmth of Claire's touch, a small gesture that meant more than words could express. Martha had always known that Claire was a good person, but in that moment she realized how deeply Claire had become part of her life. The young woman had never made a fuss about anything. She quietly took on the role of caretaker, without ever asking for recognition or praise. Martha knew that her health was declining. She could feel it in the aching joints, the exhaustion that never quite left her body. The pain was a constant companion now, and she couldn't ignore it anymore. Claire, despite her own busy life, continued to care for Martha with no hesitation. Claire was steady, reliable, and always there when Martha needed her. She had become Martha's rock, someone she could depend on, someone who made her feel cared for and safe in her old age. But it was during these difficult times that Martha began to think deeply about her family, about Emily, about Claire, and about what family really meant. She remembered the years she spent raising Emily, pouring all her love and energy into her. But now, Emily was distant, and Martha began to wonder if the love she had given her daughter had truly been returned. It was Claire, the woman who wasn't her blood, who had shown her that love wasn't just something you inherited. It was something that was built through actions, through care, and through the little things that matter. Martha lay in her hospital bed at San Francisco General, feeling every painful ache and throb in her body. The pain wasn't just from an aging body, but also from the emotional weight that had been building up over time. While her daughter Emily had been absent, her daughter-in-law Claire was the only one who consistently showed up. Martha never expected Claire, the woman who wasn't her flesh and blood, to become the most important person in her life. Claire had been there every day, bringing her meals, changing her bandages, and making sure the doctor's orders were followed. Claire was the only one who seemed to genuinely care, and Martha couldn't help but feel deeply moved by this. While Claire stayed by her side, Emily remained absent. Martha couldn't help but think back on all the calls she had made. Calls that were either ignored or answered quickly, with no real concern. A part of Martha felt abandoned. For so many years, she had given everything for her family, especially Emily. But now, when she needed care the most, Emily was nowhere to be found, too absorbed in her work and personal life. Martha, I know you're tired, but you need to rest. We'll get through this, okay? Claire gently spoke as she sat beside the bed. Martha didn't respond right away, just soaking in Claire's words. The softness of her tone and the care she showed meant more than anything at that moment. Martha lay silently staring at the ceiling, her mind racing with thoughts. She knew that her health was deteriorating, her body ached more each day, and she couldn't ignore it anymore. Yet, even as she grew weaker, Martha's mind was troubled by something else, something deeper. She feared that when she passed, the house she had lived in for so many years would fall into the hands of someone undeserving. She knew Emily wouldn't care about the house, just as she hadn't cared about Martha in her time of need. So in the midst of her pain, Martha decided to change the way she would handle her estate. She began to consider leaving the house to Claire and her granddaughter Lily, not Emily, the daughter who had shown her no care. This decision shocked Martha, but she couldn't lie to herself anymore. Claire, though not her flesh and blood, had shown her love and compassion in ways that Emily never had. Martha had witnessed Claire never asking for anything, just quietly taking on the role of caretaker, without demanding recognition or praise. One morning, as Martha rested in her hospital room, Claire was sitting by her side, as usual. Then, Martha's phone rang. It was Emily, and Martha could hear the tension in her daughter's voice. "Mom, I just heard something, and I can't believe it. What are you doing?" Emily's tone was cold and sharp. "What do you mean, Emily?" Martha asked, though she knew what was coming. "I hear you're planning to leave the house to Claire. I can't believe it. You can't do this, Mom." Emily's voice was filled with anger. "You always said you wouldn't play favorites, but now you're doing this? Claire isn't even your blood. This isn't fair." Martha was silent. The tension in the room was palpable. While Emily criticized and blamed her, Claire continued to care for Martha without a word, not asking for anything in return. That afternoon, Emily came to visit Martha, her face still full of anger, her voice icy. "Mom, have you made up your mind? You're showing favoritism to Claire, and you can't do this," Emily snapped. Claire looked up from her work, then stepped over to Martha's side. "Emily, you don't need to do this," Claire said quietly but firmly. "I never asked for any of this, and I don't want to make this harder for you. But your mother has the right to make her decision." Emily stood still for a moment, eyes filled with frustration. "I'm not going to let this happen. She's my mother," she yelled, her voice rising. The room was silent for a long moment, only the faint beeping of the machines in the background breaking the stillness. Martha then looked directly at Emily, her eyes steady. "I've cared for you all these years, Emily, but when I needed you the most, you weren't here. Claire was here. She was always here. She deserves the house, not because I'm playing favorites, but because she's the only one who's truly been there for me." Emily stood frozen, her face pale. Martha could see the conflict in her eyes, but it was too late to change her mind. The decision had been made. The next day, Martha woke up in the hospital, her body feeling drained, but her mind still reeling from the confrontation with Emily. Throughout her life, she had given all her love and care to Emily, but now, the hurt was clear in her daughter's eyes. Emily couldn't understand why her mother would leave the house to Claire. Emily felt betrayed, and it was like a wound in her heart that couldn't be healed. After leaving the hospital, Emily didn't call her mother for 3 days. Martha didn't know what to do. Each time she thought of her daughter, the pain swelled in her chest. Emily, the child she had sacrificed so much for, was nowhere to be found when she needed her most. Martha wondered if she had been wrong to give everything for Emily, only to receive nothing in return during her later years. And the house she had lived in for so many years, was it worth more than all the love she had given her daughter? One afternoon, as sunlight streamed through the hospital window, Martha gazed out and suddenly felt a deep emptiness settle over her. The memories of the years when Emily was a little girl, running to her for comfort whenever she was hurt, flooded her mind. Has my daughter, who I gave everything to, really become someone I don't recognize? Martha wondered. It was a question that she would never get a clear answer to. Martha decided to call Emily again, but this time it wasn't a call full of frustration. It was a call where she hoped to understand what was happening in her daughter's heart. Emily picked up the phone after 3 rings. "Mom, I only have a few minutes. There's a serious problem at work," Emily said, her tone still strained. "I don't understand why you're leaving the house to Claire. I've given my life to work, to the family. Why aren't you giving anything to me?" Exactly was right 9. Lidiven, say here, glats. Where as a me different day, can into me, as a way batted to the violet and displains for the same knave. Lashen. Mysician. Something to me. Why aren't doing dated, date, lot, on, and more see, and fine, like hey, k, why, monas. Diff, where I go, to say, mon, what? Worse, why were done. Count you, the mon, I do, beige, tess, I full the ray, Mike, I by, no, must, refaches. Things, teria, I do, that command to kide, like key, I, t, pras, prun, I need to, leather the war this. Martha felt a sharp pain in her heart, but she calmly responded, "I haven't forgotten you, Emily, but love isn't just something you say. It's about what you do for each other, especially when one of us is weak and needs help." Emily was silent for a moment, and Martha could feel the suffocating tension in the conversation. "Mom, you know I've always been busy, but I've sacrificed everything for work. Why can't you give me something? Why don't you love me like you used to?" Emily asked, her voice cracking. Martha felt as though a knife had been thrust into her heart. She'd given everything to Emily, but now her daughter didn't understand, didn't see what she had done for her. At that moment, the truth became painfully clear in Martha's mind. True love wasn't always based on blood. It was about actions, about being there in difficult moments, about sacrifice without expecting anything in return. Martha looked out the window, her heart heavy with sorrow and regret. Have I made a mistake? She wondered. She had thought that love and care would be the bridge between her and Emily, but now it seemed to only make her daughter feel abandoned. Emily couldn't understand that her mother had loved her not through material gifts or words, but through the countless acts of care and sacrifice she had given her, even when Emily hadn't noticed. Though Martha never said it aloud, she had come to the realization that she couldn't let this love fade into the background. Martha realized something important. She had been so focused on Emily's career and life that she had forgotten about herself. Not only did this make Emily someone who only took and didn't give back, but it also left Martha feeling alone when faced with illness and aging. Even so, Martha didn't regret her decision. Claire had shown that true love wasn't always about blood ties. It was about care, action, and being there for someone in their time of need. No matter what she did, Emily would never understand the sacrifices Martha had made for her until she saw Claire, the woman who wasn't her blood, but had been by her side the whole time. Martha decided that she could no longer endure the silence. Meanwhile, Claire continued to care for her, every gesture of hers gentle but firm, like a light in the dark. Although Martha knew that leaving the house to Claire would disrupt the family, she couldn't turn back. She had waited too long to make this decision, and now was the time to face the truth. The situation became more intense as Emily began to express her frustration more openly. She started taking more drastic measures, even suggesting that her mother was no longer in her right mind. Martha never thought she would face death in this way. One afternoon, while sitting in a chair in her hospital room, she suddenly felt a sharp pain shooting up from her lower abdomen. The pain was so intense that she had to grip the armrests of the chair, gasping for air. The pain grew worse, blinding her with its intensity, and she couldn't breathe. It felt like everything around her was spinning, and for a moment, she couldn't tell if she would make it. Panicking, Martha quickly pressed the emergency button. The sensation of dizziness spread through her body. By this point, she was asking herself, what will I do if no one shows up? Time seemed to stop in those few moments, with only the pain and the loneliness filling the air. She had hoped that her daughter Emily would receive the call and rush to her side, even if just for once. But she realized that since being admitted to the hospital, Emily hadn't visited her. No phone calls, no messages, just a cold, deafening silence. When the paramedics arrived, they rushed her into the ambulance and took her to the emergency room. The pain intensified and Martha couldn't fight it anymore. When she woke up in the ER, she saw Claire sitting beside her bed, holding a cool cloth to her forehead. Claire never took her eyes off Martha, her face filled with worry and calm determination. "Martha, are you okay?" Claire asked, her voice gentle, like a warm breeze in the cold, sterile hospital room. "The doctors said you need emergency surgery for appendicitis. Do you consent?" Martha looked at Claire, her eyes blurry from the pain, but in that moment she realized something clearly. Claire was the only one who had been there for her. While Emily, her own daughter, had been absent, Claire had been present every step of the way. Even though Claire wasn't her blood, she had shown Martha more care and concern than Emily ever had in recent years. As Claire continued to care for her, Martha couldn't help but notice that Emily still kept her distance. No calls, no visits, no sign of concern. At that moment, Martha truly realized that Emily hadn't been there for her when she needed her most. The daughter she had sacrificed everything for, the one she had poured her love and energy into, was nowhere to be found in her time of need. The only time Emily called Martha was after the surgery. Her voice was hurried, distant. "Mom, why didn't you call me first? How's everything? Did the doctors do the surgery?" Emily asked quickly, almost like she was rushing to get back to something more important. Martha couldn't answer immediately. Emily's words felt like a blow to her heart. She could sense the coldness in her daughter's voice. Even though Emily was still her daughter, it became clear that the warmth that once existed between them had faded. As the pain continued to throb in her body and the doctors prepared for the surgery, Martha couldn't help but reflect on everything that had led to this point. She wondered if she had made a mistake by leaving the house to Claire. Was it unfair? Shouldn't Emily, her own daughter, be the one to inherit it? But deep down, she knew that Claire was the only one who had shown genuine love and care for her. The only one who had truly been present. While Claire patiently sat by her side, continuing to speak with the doctors and follow instructions, Martha gazed at her with gratitude. Claire wasn't just a daughter-in-law. She was a real family member, the one person who had been there for her when it mattered most. After the surgery, when Martha was beginning to recover in her hospital room, her phone rang. It was Emily again. Martha felt her pain surge once more, but this time, it wasn't physical pain. It was the coldness in Emily's voice that pierced through her. "Mom, why didn't you call me sooner? What's going on? Are you okay? They said you had surgery?" Emily asked quickly, her tone still rushed, like she had something more important to do. Martha didn't want to answer. She didn't want to say anything. She realized that no matter what she said, nothing would change. Emily would never understand the sacrifices Martha had made for her. And somehow, That truth was clearer now than ever. And somehow, that truth was clearer now than ever. Despite all of this, Claire never left her side. She didn't just care for Martha physically, she cared for her emotionally. Claire stayed close, prepared her meals, changed her bandages, and listened to every word the doctors said. Claire was the only one who didn't need to say much, but her actions spoke volumes. She was there when Martha needed someone the most, and her steady presence made Martha feel loved in a way that Emily never had. One morning, as Martha slowly regained her strength, Claire sat beside her, gently holding her hand. "Martha, I know you're tired, but you still have so much to live for. And I'll always be here, right beside you." Martha looked at Claire, her eyes filled with gratitude. Throughout all this time, Claire had been more than just a daughter-in-law. She had become a daughter in every sense of the word. She had done what a real daughter would do, and Martha couldn't help but realize that Claire was the one who had truly been there for her all along. As Emily's continued absence becomes more evident, the tension between her and Martha rises. The audience will feel a growing sense of frustration as Emily's coldness pushes Martha to make decisions that might further distance her from her daughter. The question remains, will Emily ever understand the sacrifices Martha made? Can their relationship be repaired, or has it already broken beyond repair? Meanwhile, Claire's unwavering support for Martha, her quiet care, and her consistency will make the audience root for her. They'll begin to see Claire not just as a daughter-in-law, but as a true family member who understands the true meaning of love and sacrifice. Martha sat in the quiet of her hospital room, the sound of the heart monitor the only constant noise. The days had blurred together, filled with rest and pain, but as the physical pain began to subside, something else took its place: clarity. She had spent so much of her life giving to others, especially Emily, hoping that her love would one day be returned. But now, Martha saw that love wasn't just about what she had given. It was about presence, about action, about showing up when it mattered most. For the first time in a long while, Martha felt her resolve solidify. She had been hesitating for too long, weighed down by guilt and uncertainty. But now she knew it was time to stop second-guessing herself. It was time to make the decisions that would shape the rest of her life and, more importantly, secure the legacy she wanted to leave behind. Martha's thoughts turned to her estate, her house, the only thing of true value she had left to give. She thought of Emily, her daughter, who had always been too busy to give her the emotional support she so desperately needed. And then she thought of Claire, her daughter-in-law, who had never asked for anything but had given her everything: care, patience, love. After days of weighing the emotions and the consequences, Martha finally made up her mind. She would leave her house to Claire and Lily, not to Emily. It wasn't a decision she made lightly, but it was one she knew was right. Emily had her own life, her career, and the luxury of being busy. Claire, on the other hand, had been there for her through it all. Claire had shown up when no one else did, and Martha knew she deserved to be the one to inherit the house. Claire remained a steady presence in Martha's life, caring for her with the same quiet grace she had always shown. Every day, Claire came to the hospital, ensuring Martha was comfortable, helping with her recovery, and giving her emotional support when it was needed most. She never complained, never hesitated to do whatever it took to make Martha feel cared for. And when it was time for Martha to go home, Claire was there, ready to help her settle in, making sure her needs were met. Martha marveled at Claire's selflessness. It was clear to her now that Claire wasn't just a daughter-in-law by marriage. She was family, in the truest sense of the word. Over the years, Claire had shown her that love wasn't about bloodlines, it was about actions. She had become the daughter Martha had always hoped Emily would be, but never had. Emily, still caught up in the whirlwind of her career, continued to visit sparingly. She wasn't a constant presence, and Martha had come to accept that. But one afternoon, months after Martha's surgery, Emily showed up at the house unannounced. She walked in hesitantly, wearing a professional suit and carrying a briefcase, as if it were just another errand to run. "Mama, how are you feeling?" Emily asked, her voice flat, as though she had rehearsed the words 100 times in her head. "I've been so busy, but I wanted to check in. Martha looked at her daughter, seeing the exhaustion in her eyes, but also the same familiar detachment. This wasn't the Emily who had once run to her for comfort. This was someone who had become a stranger in her own mother's life. Martha took a deep breath, steadying herself, and said, "I'm doing better, Emily, but you're right, you've been busy." Emily sat down at the edge of the couch, opening her briefcase and pulling out some documents, as if this were just another business meeting. "Listen, I've been thinking about everything," she began, her tone almost defensive. "Maybe it's time for us to talk about the house. Get things in order for when you're ready to move on." She hesitated for a moment, sensing the tension in the air, but didn't pause for long. "You've always said it should go to me. It's my inheritance, right?" Martha's heart sank. Emily's words were cold and transactional, as if the house, her legacy, were nothing more than a financial matter to be sorted out. Martha stared at her daughter for a moment before speaking. "Emily, it's not just about who gets the house. It's about who's been there when it mattered most. It's about who's shown up." Emily frowned, her brow furrowing with confusion. "What are you talking about, Mom?" Martha took a deep breath, gathering all her strength. "I've given everything I could to you, Emily. I've always been there, always supported you. But where were you when I needed you the most? When I was in the hospital, in pain? Where were you when I needed you the most? When I was in the hospital, in pain? Where were you?" The words hung in the air between them. Emily's face reddened, and for a moment Martha thought she might break down. But instead, Emily remained silent. Her lips parted as if to say something, but nothing came out. Emily sat there for a long time, the silence in the room growing heavy. Finally, she looked at her mother, really looked at her, for the first time in a long time. There was a change in her eyes, a shift that Martha hadn't seen in years. Emily's defenses were crumbling, and for the first time, Martha saw her daughter as someone capable of understanding. Not just what Martha had done for her, but why she had done it. I've been so focused on my career, on what I thought was important. But you're right, I've been selfish. I haven't been here for you, and I see that now." Emily's voice wavered, and she looked away for a moment, gathering herself. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry." For the first time in years, Emily's apology felt genuine. It was more than just an acknowledgement of the past. It was an admission of her own failings and a step toward mending the rift between them. Martha reached out and took her daughter's hand, her heart swelling with both relief and sorrow. "I know you've been busy, Emily, but love isn't just about being busy, it's about being present. And I've needed you to be present." Emily nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I see that now, Mom. I see it." The conversation that day marked a turning point for both Martha and Emily. For the first time in a long while, they shared an honest moment, one that brought them closer together, despite everything that had happened. But for Martha, the true revelation came not from Emily's apology, but from her own realization about love and family. In the days that followed, Martha made her final decision. The house, her legacy, would go to Claire and Lily. She knew that it wasn't a decision anyone in the family would fully understand, but she also knew it was the right one. Claire had proven that love wasn't just about bloodlines. It was about action, about showing up in the difficult moments. And in the end, it was Claire who had truly earned it. Though Emily initially struggled with Martha's decision, over time she began to understand. It wasn't easy and it didn't happen overnight, but Emily started to see the value in what Claire had done. The sacrifices, the quiet care that Claire had given, without expecting anything in return. Emily began to understand that those actions were what made Claire family. One afternoon, a few weeks after their conversation, Emily came to visit again, this time without any work agenda. She sat down with Martha, and for the first time, they didn't talk about the house or inheritance. Instead, they talked about life, about memories, and about the future. Emily had changed. I've learned a lot from you, Mom, about what it means to be family, about what it means to love. Emily's voice was softer now, and there was a warmth in her words that hadn't been there before. Martha smiled, her heart swelling with pride and hope. I know you have, Emily, and I'm proud of you. In that moment, Martha knew that things were beginning to heal. The wounds of the past were still there, but they were no longer as deep. And while things could never go back to the way they were, perhaps that was okay, because the love Martha had always sought was finally being understood, not through words, but through the actions of those she loved.